Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Track Talk Live. I'm your host, Steve Doyle, along with our model railroad expert, Doug Hodgdon. Clickety and clack. Okay, we're over with the corny stuff. Yeah, I got that stuff out of the way. We're not click and clack, clickety and clack. How are you doing?
Well, excellent.
Are you?
I've been working on my own layout, as you know, and I enthused myself, which was kind of neat, through my my upcoming blog.
Yep.
Where I miniaturized myself in a 1/64th scale and walked around my own layout.
So that's S scale, but the point of that blog, or the point of shrinking yourself down, is to get an impression of what needs detailing, right? So it's kind of a super detailing
in eye level view,
yes,
a miniature eye level view,
yeah.
And to see where maybe I would set things down, or maybe where I would walk, or maybe, gee, that looks funny, there's something missing up there, that type of thing.
So let's tell them who's bringing it to you. It's Model Railroad Academy with Alan Keller. We're here monthly, sometimes a couple times a month, whenever we kind of feel like it, I guess. But we would encourage you to submit your questions right now on the screen below which you're watching. And that's also a really good place. There's a banner right below that allows you to sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter, which comes right to your inbox, and it has all the latest news about model railroading tips and tricks, and there's what else was I going to say? Yeah, tips and tricks and videos and clips and things like that.
Yeah, all kinds of fun stuff to get you enthused.
Yeah.
Enthusiasm is good.
Yeah, enthusiasm is good. So please sign up for your weekly e-newsletter, and if you want to become a subscriber, you get the full library of the Alan Keller collection, which is the preeminent American sort of video digest of the greatest model railroads that have existed in the States. So as you can see, I've turned the lights down on the back of my Chicago skyline now. You've seen it lit up before in the background, but now it's getting to be dusk, and so I've turned on the building lights and put a little blue cast on here, so it's a different view of my downtown Chicago and terminal yard at the base of it. So we were shooting our first product video today, which is a product sponsored video. We won't tell you exactly for whom, but the type of video is about detection devices. So want to say a little bit about that, because you build a nice little well, not a diorama, but you did a mock-up
display. I call it a display.
Yeah, to show how detection and activation works. We talked about it on the real railroads, but then also how it can make ours more like the prototypes. So tell me about what that device was.
Well, as a background, in model railroading, technology has changed a lot. I was talking with someone yesterday about the fact that I started with a Walther's trigger track, if anybody remembers that. That was a 9-inch piece of snap track that had a little wiper on there that would contact the rail every time a wheel went over it. So if you had a grade crossing flasher hooked up to it, it would go blip, 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 blip,
oh,
blip,
no kidding. And so that was supposed to be the flashing.
Yeah. Well, you know.
So modern devices now have circuit boards and all the kind of built-in innards, right?
Technology is a nice thing in a lot of ways. So now we're using DCC has been a big help, but we're using current detectors. We're using photo sensors, and we're using infrared,
which is
sensors.
What the product was today.
Yeah, and today was infrared, and each one has its own advantages and probably some disadvantages, but it's just wonderful to know where your trains are, just as the railroads need to know where their trains are.
Yeah, and also it gives you the ability to operate wigwags or crossing gates or the flasher lights with crossbucks. So there's lots of applications for this. If you add, say, for example, a motor and a relay, so there's all kinds of things you can trigger with these things. It's very, very cool, and you might look for it. It's probably going to be out in another month or so.
You can do track occupancy and staging.
Yeah.
Some guys actually do dispatcher panels with track lights.
Yeah, it's really good for hidden storage too.
Tracks, lit up track schematics that show where the train is. Yeah, so many cool things.
So anyway, Some questions have been coming in live. We're really grateful for the questions, and please keep them coming in. Every time we do these Track Talk Lives, we get questions from all over the world. So, Tom, I'm not sure where you are, but you've asked, what's the best method for removing factory road numbers and replacing them? And he models in N scale. Some people use pencil erasers, if you're gentle enough. There are other products as well, though, right?
Well, you know, every brand seems to be a little bit different.
How they apply
yeah,
that.
it's hard to say. Alcohol, some people use brake fluid.
Because sometimes they're pad printed, sometimes they're decals.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And Steve likes Irish whiskey.
Yeah, don't use the good 21-year stuff. So it's very expensive, but only a drop will do. And it's Irish whiskey, so don't cut it with a drop of water either. It's got to be the pure stuff.
You have to experiment a little bit.
Exactly. But you know, just probably, you know, do it on a car you don't care too much about, but of the type or of the same manufacturer, the one you're trying to remove, and do it in a part that if you screw up, it won't mess up the paint job too much. Okay, but experiment with it. So Jenkins asked, is there a good place to get really cheap buffer stops? If not, how can I make some? He doesn't say what he's modeling in. Let's assume it's HO. Walthers, I'm sure, sells them. I'm sure there are a host of other companies that do as well. Now, as far as making them, we've done, you know, ties piled up at the end, and they're just, you know, higgly-piggly ties, something that would stop a car from going off the back tracks. What else have you used?
Well, pile of gravel, dirt. Now, the other thing is, depending whether these are going to be seen or not, are they on hidden tracks? If they're on hidden tracks, they could be just a block of wood.
It could be a block of wood. It could actually be a screw that just
I've actually used a block of wood with a little foam pad on it. I have that at the end of my staging.
Or push pins.
So if I run into it, it's padded.
Yeah.
Maybe you could send us a little more information. We can help you more.
Yeah. John has asked, thanks for watching, John. What's a good medium for representing brush? Well, I was going to say bushes would be, lichen would be one medium, but there are a lot of manufacturers out there. A lot of people don't like to go buy products like a Woodland Scenics or something like that, because they're, as you know, model railroaders have a reputation for being thrifty, cheap, some might say. But the guys who like to actually go out and get them out of nature, what would you suggest?
Well, I actually, on my layout, I've used a lot of just dried weeds, stuff that looks sort of natural for my Southern California area.
Yeah, brush could be low bushes. It doesn't have to be grass, native grass.
I'm not going to invite a horticulturist over to my house to examine it, but you know, it's close enough for me. And I also have used, and I'm not sure, it's one of the German companies, maybe Heki, the grass mat. Tall grass mat. And I cut it up into little pieces and then integrate that into the other stuff, and it looks pretty
Silphor makes a product.
Static grass.
Woodland Scenics has a whole host of things. So if you don't mind spending a little bit of money, they're actually made for our hobby or hobbyists, and they look great. And they don't cost an arm and a leg either, unless you're trying to do an 80 by 100 foot layout. That's a lot of brush. So Garth has asked, do you know of a template or easier way to print curtains and storefronts for HO scale buildings? I know there are some on eBay. I think it's called John's Storefronts or something like that. I'm not sure if they're still in business. I've used them before in S scale because it's back from the front windows of our stores. And so it looks like just something is happening back there. So the windows don't look blank. Curtains, honestly, Garth, you probably could go online and take a look at curtain samples and then just print them out for your particular scale, and just size them up or size them down, depending, and or you can go to go to a curtain shop or a draper's magazine or something like that, and you'll see lots of samples. And if you have access to a printer, scale them up, scale them down. Just something that's happening back there. It makes a building, a structure of any kind, look so much better, so much more used. which is the idea.
Yeah, I know in the old days we used to go to a thing like a Sears catalog,
Yeah,
and cut out samples
Yeah.
from the Sears catalog. Now you can do the same thing, print offline, off web, but that,
yeah. And sometimes storefronts,
Yeah.
you could also go to. I love to get old Life magazines or old newspapers, black and white newspapers, and shrink those down. The adverts look great. You can put them in a window if it's a grocery store or a liquor store. Go to the era that you're modeling for that magazine or newspaper, and you've got the real deal.
Yeah.
So good
Cool
question.
stuff.
Yeah. Michael has asked, what's the best material to use for making a baffle for my N-scale sound decoder speaker for my Kato FEF? Can I use the insulation like we use, let's see, that just said, can I use the insulation like we use for platform and mountains?
Oh, he's talking about the rigid foam, maybe.
Well, like what we have here, possibly
ceiling
ceiling tile foam.
I've just used little cardboard boxes. Find a miniature cardboard box that will work. I mean, we're not sure if you want a rectangular or square shape or a round shape, but I've even made my own cardboard boxes.
Cardboard, or if you got spare styrene around, just cut yourself a tiny little box. That's all you need. You just need to seal it.
Right.
Seal the space around the speaker, and those will work just fine.
You just poke a little hole in the box for the wire, and then you seal that up with a little silicone stick. And
it's not hard. And I think if you go online, they probably show you how to make those little baffles. You certainly can see how they are constructed from sites that actually sell baffles, and there are ones that do that. Soundtracks, for example, makes them, and I'm sure some of the other decoder companies make baffles as well.
Here's a good one. So, I've actually used a toilet paper roll for a baffle.
That's a huge speaker.
Well, a bigger scale. Yeah. But anyway, you can actually use the round
the
round cardboard tube and then slice it and put an end on it, and for a round baffle. So
leave it to Doug for that cheap way out.
Don't throw away your toilet paper rolls.
But if you are, recycle them, please. Eric has asked, nice show, guys. Do you happen to know a source for tinted films or clear glass for passenger cars? Doug?
And I haven't done this for years, but you used to be able to buy this film that you could use to tint your windows in a car, in an automobile, if you go to a auto supply place. And it was a film that you stuck on your existing glass of your car. And it was really neat stuff. It was thin enough, and you could actually, if you thought it was too thin, if you're doing a bigger window, you could actually put that on the back of a piece of clear plastic that you're using in your model.
The tint you want.
But it's really cool stuff, and I haven't looked for years, but
I could suggest maybe a Photoshop that deals in higher end photography needs, equipments that sell tripods and baffles, light baffles, and we've got a couple places like that here in the Twin Cities, and you can buy rolls by the yard, by the square yard of whatever tinted material you want, and it's a very, very thin thing. We use this in the television business too, to put over our lights if we want to adjust color temperatures or we want to cast an orange tint in the background.
Okay, well, you
see a lot of that. So that's very, very thin. I'm not even sure what the material is. It's plastic of some sort.
Now, years ago, I got a box of from a photo supply place, a box of, I guess they were kind of used or blank photo negatives, but they were kind of gray. I don't know exactly how that worked, but they were black and white photo negatives. But they were just tinted enough in kind of a grayish tint to, so I mean, you don't want the glass to look too perfect. You want it to be dimmed a little bit. And actually, those photo negatives work great. And I've got a lifetime supply of photo negatives now. So.
Let's see. Joe has asked, do you have any experience running 20 to 25 car trains using McHenry knuckle couplers? No. I haven't been an HL, but you have been. So he has, here's his problem. He says, I have a unit train of Athearn tank cars and wondering how they'll fare on a club layout with a tall helix. So is he probably talking about, is the coupler strong enough to make a grade that's going to go up a helix, right? I know what our favorites are. Our favorites happen to be Katie, and that's kind of the hobby standard, but there are other Sargent engineering or Sargent couplers, and McHenry's another one.
Yeah, I would think McHenry's would be fine, although like you say, Steve. I love KD couplers. I've used them all my life. They're heavy duty. They're probably the best quality couplers on the market. And
they look fairly prototypical.
Yeah.
Yeah, in size.
I mean, KD also makes that more scale size coupler now, which is more like the McHenry. And of course, when you use a more scale coupler, then your coupler height between cars is more. So
make sure you get a coupler gauge.
You don't want your tank train coming apart about halfway up that helix. Yeah. So you have to make sure your coupler height is perfect in all those cars.
Yeah, and maybe you could just take your 2 or 3 cars or 4 cars, put them on a flat piece of track, and just see what kind of pressure it takes to pull those couplers apart. Yeah. And if you without breaking them, and if they hold together with fairly good pressure, then I would have some certain amount of confidence that they'll take a grade if they do it slow enough. But again, it's just experimentation.
I don't have a whole lot of trust in the plastic couplers. They seem to twist and things, and because I like weighted cars besides, and so I twisting isn't good for me.
Yeah.
In any form.
Yeah, exactly. It goes without saying. Hey guys, this is Jory asking. I got a Bachmann Rail Chief set to get into the hobby a while back, and after a bit of expanding, I've got my eye on an SD40-2. So I was wondering, can I run the 40-2 that came with the set in tandem with an SD40-2, or would I need to use 2 GP40s? Where did the GP come in? Oh, GP, so I can run the GP40.
Well, he's talking about a mismatched power lash. Well, is he analog or DCC?
He doesn't say. Maybe
with DCC you can correct it if the 2 locomotives don't work well together. You can correct it. With analog, it's a little bit different. If one runs faster, we used to do the old trick of putting back-to-back diodes in series with the motor, and every time do that with a faster locomotive. Then every time you put diodes in, it drops the voltage by 0.7 of a volt. So you can.
It's a lot easier with DCC.
Yeah, you can incrementally drop the voltage on a faster locomotive.
Rock has asked, I'm looking for N-scale structure. A lot of N-scale questions tonight.
Well, hey, the
N-scale is what, number 2 or number 3?
Well, I say it's growing faster. It's not as big as HO, but growing faster.
Yeah, growing, probably the fastest growing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As is G.
So.
Yeah, garden scale. I'm looking for N-scale structures, but each building I find is fairly expensive. Is there a less expensive route? Possibly ones that require being assembled and or painted. So it sounds like what he's finding is the already assembled ones are expensive, which they are, because you've had to pay someone to put it together and paint it. And,
I think it's reasonable for the amount of work it takes to do it.
There are, every man has his own level of what's expensive and what isn't expensive. If you have a large N-scale layout, it's going to take a lot of buildings. But there are lots of N-scale kits out there that are not terribly expensive. I mean, if you're doing a cityscape, get a lot of buildings. A lot of big buildings.
Now, my friend Don in North Carolina, who says he's watching, and who loves Chicago, is doing skyscrapers with, will do skyscrapers with rubber molds. And so that's another way, if you have one kit and you want to copy it multiple times, then you can use the rubber mold and just make a whole lot of extra walls. Yeah,
that's a good point. Buy one kit, and since it's only for your personal use, kind of replicate those. So
probably wouldn't want to sell it. You probably go to jail.
No, you'd go to jail. Copyright. But lots of ways to skin that one. You could even maybe print them on cardboard. You're a big fan of doing that on occasion if you're mocking things up. But again, if they're so small, the detail is small. You're just really giving the illusion that there's texture to it. N is so small you wouldn't be able to see. Is that true brick? I mean, true N-scale brick, or is it, flat?
And the further back you see, the more hazed out it could be anyway. So you could have more detail in the foreground and less detail on the back.
Yeah. Okay, Matt has asked, HO modeler here, want to get into weathering freight cars, but I'm not really sure where to start with materials and tools, etc. Do you have any beginner tips? I like to use chalks. Bragdon is one. We're not giving them in particular a plug, but it's what I'm used to
Good stuff.
working with.
Good stuff.
Good stuff, and it has a little bit of a magnetic something or other in it that allows it
A binder.
A binder, right? Yep. Monster Model Works, I think, has some. There's Pan Pastels. You know, what do you like to use? India ink. I know you.
Well, Micromark, if you're using, you're talking brands. Micromark has an assortment of chalks and tools and things you can buy. You can actually
Dr. Benz as well.
If you're using chalks, you can experiment with a stiff brush that you can buy, say, at a Michaels. I've even used an old toothbrush. So
some people like to use enamels and a little turpentine that makes it makes the paint look dripping, and that's the way things rust, you know, from the top on down, and it's very, very cool, you know. So I would say, you know, go off to a flea market and buy a basket full of of cars in your scale. Get them cheap, you know, 5 for a quarter or 5 for 50 cents, whatever, and just work on those.
And we didn't mention an airbrush.
And even airbrush, it goes
also airbrush weathering. And one thing for myself, I don't want all the cars to have the same type of weathering. I want them to look like they've come from all over the country. And so I would mix airbrush weathering with, say, India ink and chalks and paints and all that. And
even brand new cars that look like they are freshly out of the shop should have a little layer of dust, because they've been delivered, they've been on the road. Railroads, especially as they were, you know, losing money, really didn't go into much upkeep, you know, rarely washing them unless they got chopped, right? Well, or unless it was deleterious to the integrity of the surface.
In steam days, cars got a lot dirtier because of all the soot and everything too.
Yeah, especially you were saying the SP with all its tunnels, you know, things would come out with black soot.
You see the locomotive come out of a tunnel, it's just like a black cloud. So.
Right. Okay, Simpson asks, I'm trying to find some N-scale, another N-scale guy, an N-scale car with artillery mounted to them. Any advice? Well, you don't say what era. I know some model railroaders are into the Civil War era, and so that could be cannons on flat cars, you know, I think they had back then. Up to World War I, you got a lot of artillery that was put on cars, you know, specially made cars. And then World War II, there were long toms on cars. The Germans had extra long guns as well that would fire shells 30, 60 miles, whatever. But where would you suggest this guy go besides scratch building, which you can always do? Go to a military site, you know, a military hobbyist site, and you could buy separate weapons, and then you could, you know, fix them to your own cars in a gondola or you know, flat car. I think most of them are probably on.
Researched that much for quite a while, but I know there Airfix was one brand that made strictly military.
I was going to say European sites would probably they're into wargaming and the realistic part of that hobby. You may find some that are ready to buy, right? Or ready to run right out of the box.
So, and I don't know, it's probably a multiple scales. I just you'd have to do a little research on that.
Do research. Let us know how you do, and tell us what era you're looking for that artillery. If it's you know, current day or World War II or Korea, Vietnam, whatever. You know, artillery moved by a lot of it moved by rail when it was until it was embarked at ports. So.
And it's probably not a good thing to use live ammunition on your own way.
Not a good thing. Not, you know, like mounted Derringer.
you can wreck your layout pretty quick if you use live ammunition.
Yeah. Okay. D asked, I am opening a restaurant and it's going to include a train. I was looking for specific guidance. Looking at about 200 feet of track suspended from the ceiling and a train with 10 to 20 box cars that we can put advertising or personalized logos, etc., on each one. Ooh. Right up your alley.
I've done that for 50 years.
Yeah. Let's see. I guess I'm looking for a place where I can find a ton of track and a strong engine or two, and tips and tricks as to how I can make it happen excellently. What are your thoughts? And we're 20 minutes in, which means I get to tell you that this is Track Talk Live with Clickety and Clack, brought to you by Model Railroad Academy. And we invite you to sign up for our weekly free e-newsletter, which brings tips and tricks and video clips and blogs and all that good stuff right into your email box. So it's kind of a no-brainer. and it's free. Best of all, we're cheap, right? So, and don't forget, if you want to view some back episodes, some past episodes of the best of Clickety and Clack, the lining up, the web is jammed with requests right now. Just go to the MRA website and click on the live banner, and you'll get a drop down for whatever month you want. We're coming up on, I think, 10 months now of shows.
Yeah, we just missed being on the Academy Awards. We're close.
Yeah, we were close, but no cigar.
Now, in answer to the question here about the
this is right up your alley. Because
I've been doing commercial trains for 50 years.
Mostly in G,
in G scale, which are really the only reliable trains for that kind of service. But
well, and also running across the ceiling, you want something bigger, because if you put HO or N scale or even S at the top of the ceiling and ran it around, it's pretty hard to see.
It's hard to see, and G scale will run very reliable for a long time. I have commercial trains running daily, and imagine how many miles they get. Round and round and round and round.
You've done it for a chain of pizza parlors, pizza restaurants here, and they're really popular, right?
Yeah.
So when this guy hires out, he travels.
I would say contact me through Doug at modelrailroadacademy.com.
He can also give you some tips.
I'd love to give you some pointers. You don't have to hire me right away necessarily, unless you want to. But but anyway,
what a suck up.
But I'd be happy to give you some pointers, and it's fun. I like doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he does. And you're off doing it every week when you're not doing this and sleeping in.
Maintain the trains once they're installed.
Yeah. So Terry has asked, how in the world do you make a cascading waterfall and make it look real? Besides using real water, which would have to then move in slow motion because of the scale.
Even real water doesn't look real necessarily.
So what have you done? I know there are lots of different ways that you can do it, and I'm sure you could find a host of them on websites. In fact, if you become a subscriber to Model Railroad Academy, Alan Keller has done a series on waterfall and water features, and we may even do it if enough people want some new techniques.
Do it on a how-to video.
So let's talk about the medium you use. So what do you recommend?
Well, I've seen people use gloss medium or glossy clear acrylic caulk and that kind of thing, and it kind of depends on the size of the waterfall, how big, how tall, how wide, and you want to have good lighting because you really want to show off that sparkle. Well, I'll tell you what I've done. It actually works kind of cool, I think, is I've used tinsel. This may sound crazy, but I've taken tinsel for the base and got that glued in ahead of time, and then run gloss medium down it. And
but how does it stick to it? Because that's a pretty slick surface.
Well, it's going to
just have to keep multiple coats.
And you can use the gel. Once you get it stiffened up enough, you can use the gel to put kind of like gobs of falling water coming down. And you can use there's an iridescent white paint in Artist Acrylics, which is kind of a silvery white, which gives you that silvery foam look. So you have the silvery tinsel in kind of base, encased in this gel, but it's kind of a time-consuming process. But I think it comes out neat because you can really shape it the way you want it.
And then painting it just gives you a whole different layered look. And to see them done well is people just go, wow.
And then put good light on it so it sparkles.
Scene stealer. Yeah. We should remind people that we're taking questions live tonight. We don't hear your voice, but we do get to see your questions come up just to the side of our screen here. So please ask questions. What we don't get to this month, we'll answer next month. Terry has asked, how in the world, sorry, Terry, that's a cascading waterfall. Don has asked, I'm modeling a railroad located primarily in the southern USA. I thought it would be good to use a southern valve gear on some of my steam engines, not only for the nostalgia, but also because of its sound design. I got to come up here to the computer and let's keep going down with the question. However, I am having problems with acquiring the valve gear in HO scale. I wish to modify an existing chassis by replacing the valve gear it currently has. I believe it's a Valshirts, right? With southern gear. However, I am not sure how one would go about that, or if, say, Cal scale or precision scale makes a kit or parts for doing such a conversion. Anyone have more information on this? Whew, that question, I'm not sure I could.
Cool.
Yeah, very neat.
You know, it's hard to find locomotive kits anymore. I mean, back in the old days, you could buy locomotive kits, and I'm not sure about which ones would have had Southern valve gear. I don't remember, but another thing.
But there still are ones out there. I know in S scale there are locomotive parts out there that you can buy.
We don't know what scale he's
We don't
in,
know
right?
what scale.
But Northwest Short Line has all kinds of parts. That might be a possibility. And then the really cool possibility now is that with 3D printing.
Oh, you can print your own.
You could probably print your own valve gear and get it exactly the way you want it. So that would really be cool. And if you do figure that out, let us know. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, that's for sure. Walter asked, this morning I spent several hours running some engines with friends. Great. As we say, run trains. It keeps the engines happy, it keeps the cars happy, it keeps your track happy.
Yep.
And it also discovers where you need to work.
It keeps the operator happy too.
Yeah, it keeps the operator happy too. But it does keep your tracks clean, right? And
polish the rails.
And engines like to be exercised. It keeps the motor and all that fluids and stuff.
Exercise them.
Right. So anyway, he forgot to add smoke fluid and was running it dry on his Weaver 280. Just got off the phone and he says it's not smoking anymore and the board is blackened. I may be wrong, but with the lead weight that the front of the engine takes up, there are no replacement smoke units for a Weaver. Anyone have suggestions on where to get replacements? He's using HO scale. Look here, he's using HO. That's good. Good question from HO. So, well,
Walther's
Sleuth, yes, Sleuth, I was going to say, is one you can use even using chimneys on your buildings.
A lot of them drop in from the top.
Yeah, sounds like he burned his element out, right?
If you can reach in there with a needle nose pliers and grab that element in the center, pull it out. Usually, there's enough slack on the wire, where you can, get a new one the right diameter, resolder the wires back together, and so on.
Or you can send it off to a train shop and
shrink tube, and then put it back in the stack. So generally, they're made to be replaced because that's not an
uncommon thing that people just forget to do it. I've done it. But I run it only, the smoke unit only when the grandkids come over, because they love to see things smoking. And otherwise, to me, that smoke is a little bit too greasy and it gets on the tracks, and then you find yourself having to clean the tracks a little bit more. So anyway, but I have forgotten to turn off the smoke unit, and it has burned out in one of mine. So
if your locomotive doesn't have an on-off switch for the smoke unit, you should probably put one in, a miniature switch, a miniature slide switch or something, so you
most
can
of them
turn it off. But I think nowadays most of them have a switch.
Okay, John asked, MTH F3 ABA Jersey Central set, model number 20-2483. I've only tried to operate the A unit as I don't have room to try the others. It works fine, however, there is no smoke switch pot on the underside of the locomotive where the manual said it should be. I've taken off the shell, but could not find it. Any ideas how I turn off the smoke? Wow, smoke in an F3, huh? That's pretty cool. Most of the time, that's when I had smokes on mine, it's just the decoder. And that's an expensive little
Depends on what's
smoke.
smoking inside the engine.
Is it an Alco? They always put out smoke. But anyway, any suggestions?
Well, you're gonna have to find the wire to the smoke unit or units if you have a couple of exhaust stacks, and cut into that wire and put in an on-off switch. I mean, that's probably what it's gonna amount to. So, you're in big scale. You should have plenty of room. And Miniatronics has miniature, sub-miniature slide switches that you can mount probably on the underside and the frame somewhere, and then cut that in line to the smoke unit.
So he's MTH is
Mike's Train
scale. Mike's Train House. We're assuming, because Mike's Train House also does some S scale or S gauge, but I'm assuming, I don't think they've come out with the smoking unit yet in the S.
Well, let us know if you have more info.
Yeah, thank you. Please, on the screen right below where you're viewing, you can submit your questions, and we really appreciate them. So keep them coming, folks. Zeke has asked, have you ever done any fantasy layouts? I'm thinking about doing a layout with the Hogwarts Express from Harry Potter, and would love to know if you've done anything similar. I haven't personally. I'm sure you could take a look at the Disney World sorts of things. Think Polar Express, and castles, and I mean, certainly there are lots of castles you can get in HO from the European manufacturers. I think not Hecky, but Scenic Express lists a full, Fowler probably makes. Yeah, I always kind of think of European castles and houses and buildings when I think of, Harry Potter. So, what about doing cars for it? I'm not sure what the Harry Potter train looks like, the Potter Express. That came along a little bit after my time. But any suggestions?
Well, I'm working with a HO guy right now who's doing a caricature type layout.
That's what you call it.
I would say more kind of Disney-esque, but it's very creative, and he's doing his own thing. So it's hard to, I guess everybody has their own idea of what they want to do.
Yeah.
And I would say just go for it. I think it's cool. I think it's a whole new
scenery is going to really help make that.
Yeah.
Not only trying to modify your cars to look like that, although I don't know how much modification it would take. Probably more of the era, and I'm not sure what that is. We're going to have to watch some Harry Potter movies on this, folks. We'll come back and tell you what we think you ought to do.
It's a neat part of the hobby. It's a whole kind of revolutionary new part of the hobby, and I think it's cool.
Yeah.
So if you come up with some neat ideas, let us know.
Exactly. Fritz has asked, do you have any creative ideas as to what I could do with an outside loop switch kit?
What? So an outside loop
switch kit. I'm not quite sure I understand an outside loop switch kit.
I'm not quite sure what he means by that.
Like a switcher, or are you talking about the layout, or an outside loop?
Sure. If you can send us another question,
a little more information. You've stumped us on that one.
Yeah.
Dan says, I use O-scale. I know track can be manually cleaned, and I have most of the tools for that. But I'm wondering if there are good train car mounted track cleaners and what you recommend. Yes, there are. And you can also make your own, which you have done. So you want to describe how that? I know you brought that on the air.
I showed mine on the air before. Basically, mine was S-scale, and I took one of those foam sanding blocks.
Yeah. Say, for example, you've got a gun like this.
Cut it down with, I didn't even use a car. I took a foam sanding block, cut it down with a serrated bread knife to the right size, and mounted it on a block of wood with some bolts, so it's kind of floating a little bit on the block of wood. Some other
the rough side of masonite down on
this was a foam, not masonite.
Oh, you could do. Some people use masonite
because I cut it thinner. See? Okay. So anyway, then a block over the top with where the sanding block is kind of hanging on those bolts with weight. I put weight on there, so the block is it's kind of weighted down onto the track. Then other long bolts that go down to the trucks, and then couplers. I mean, it's ugly, but it works.
Yeah. Or you could, as I suggested, mount it underneath a spare car you've got that you don't care about drilling some holes in.
If you had a boxcar size, then you actually get the block could go up inside the car a little further.
Float a little bit.
Yeah, so you cut the frame out and then have the block inside.
You want to make sure it's putting just enough pressure on your layout, but that it's not going to be picking at your switches and pulling up your points and frogs. And
not too much drag. Should have a little bit of drag. So it's working.
But a few times around the layout gets rid of some of that greasy skid stuff that you get on there. I mean, these are supposedly clean tracks, but this still comes up with a little bit of grease, and that's just from
That's why you should run trains, because it keeps the track polished.
Yeah, and then it keeps the track polished, and every once in a while clean your wheels. Because your gunk is going to go somewhere. So Gru has asked. I have it. Gru. That's an unusual name. I have a used Athearn blue box locomotive, a beautiful piece of kit with a flywheel, etc., that has some odd symptoms. When going downhill, it picks up a lot of speed, and uphill really bogs down, both while without hauling a train. The grades both ways are very slight. If I pick up just slightly, the motor will speed up markedly, making me think this is something is binding. Before I pull it apart to see about cleaning and lubing the thing, are there pearls of wisdom to be offered? Well, cleaning and lubing, you don't necessarily have to take everything apart.
It wouldn't be, be one way or the other.
Especially when you release the pressure and then it seems to be turning all right.
Does he have do you have a can motor or an open frame motor?
Yeah.
If it was an open frame motor, it would sound to me like the brushes are going bad. Can motor, yeah, you know, can motors can go bad too, but not
They
as
last
likely.
long. Yeah.
So
You don't take those apart.
yeah,
Do you?
if it was a can motor, you just replace it.
Just replace it.
If other locomotives you have run fine on that track,
Yeah.
that would tell you that it's not anything in the track, something in the locomotive.
Yeah, the way he's described it doesn't seem to be a low voltage in that particular part of the trackage, and especially it's a very slight incline.
You could do crazy little experiments like run the locomotive, turn it around and run it the other direction and see if it does the same thing going the opposite direction. And it sounds to me like a motor problem. Either it's one way or the other, whether it's a can or an open frame, you may need to replace the motor.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your question. And please, we got another 20 minutes to go. We could certainly use your questions. We like to hear them because that gets us enthused. It also tells us what topics are kind of hot button things that we can talk about more during another Track Talk Live, or even think about doing videos for. So
or if you want us to quit talking, you can.
Yeah, you can just do this, and we can just run trains. So Jay has asked, how do you design original paint schemes?
Well, that's a very good question.
Well, you get yourself a creative program, like a paint program of some sort. Design programs, Corel, I think, makes a bunch of them. Go into any of your big box stores and get a drawing program, right? Then I'll let you take it from here.
Well,
you're the guru.
I would use real railroads as an inspiration. You know, they pay probably really good money to have some industrial designer figure that stuff out. So
you like something from the Q, you like something from Milwaukee Road, you like something from the East Coast.
Yeah.
You know, there's really very little new under the sun after 100 years of railroad liveries. You know, but you might find some ideas for trapezoidal sort of. What was it? The old Milwaukee Road used to have for their box. It was something else. It was called a weird thing, but anyway, there are certain aspects that you may like: rectangular heralds, square heralds, logo elements.
You can look at, just to see what colors go together. There's like a lot of home design type of tools that you can use to figure out what colors go well together, that type of thing. You can look at cars from the look at the tritone cars from the 1950s, the colors they use. I would say just play around with it. You can buy, like we said earlier, you can go to a flea market and buy a inexpensive shell and play around with it, experiment.
Sketch it out a little bit. If you don't have to be precise, then lay it down with thin masking tape, and start building up the colors like that. But you need a drawing program or a print program of some sort if you're going to create a logo with printing.
Well, if you're going to do the logo part. Yeah.
So, and if it's white, you probably need an Alps-like printer.
Yeah,
right?
If you're going to have a white lettering in it or a white background, something like that.
All right. Greg has asked, I have a Bachmann DCC RS3 that ran fine until I changed its number from the factory setting. The default setting is 3 when decoders come out of the factory. He set it now to 5. I used the Bachmann Easy Command System, and my other 4 with different numbers run fine. This did too until I changed its number. All the sounds and lights and functions work, but the engine won't go. Any ideas? Still under warranty. He could go back to 3 and try it again, just to absolutely wipe everything and set it back to the factory default.
Just changing the number shouldn't have done anything. I think something else got scrambled when that happened. And so you're better off like starting fresh. Just start off from basic programming, completely reprogram the decoder. Something got scrambled.
So let's see. Did he say it does make sound or does not make sound? Nothing works. Runs fine. This did too. So all the sounds and lights and functions work, but the engine won't go. I've had that happen before, where it makes the sound, the lights are working, you hear Fireman Fred if you like Fireman Fred. I'd like to shoot Fireman Fred. But anyway, that has happened before. So you go back and and go back to the factory default number 03, and then try to reprogram it from there. But Decoder Pro would, he has the which one does he got? He has, oh, his question's disappeared now. But anyway, programming, so you can actually see what's going on. You know, like Decoder Pro.
Yeah, yeah, that would be one. And then your own, was it a Bachmann system?
I think it was a Bachmann. Yeah. Let me just
your own system should have a way of just actually rebooting the decoder so that you could go back to 0.
Yeah.
Basically, erase the whole decoder. And
he uses the Bachmann Easy Command System.
Yeah.
So is that like a Decoder Pro type thing, or not as complicated?
It's not as. It should be less complicated. But then I'm not. You know, I'm not exactly sure how that works, but
and if you still have problems, call the manufacturer. They're usually, you'll find these guys are really helpful, and this is their lot in life. They like these things to run, and you know, they don't like to hear things like this happening. So they may replace it if it's, or probably would replace it if it's under warranty, if you know, if nothing works. So they do like to,
more like
to please.
More like a software problem than a hardware problem.
Yeah. Let's see, a few questions coming in here. Let me go back up a couple questions here. Fred has asked, I want to model a harbor, but I have no idea how they operate. Where are the cars going? How would a harbor function during an operating session? I want to have a roundhouse at one end of the layout and run trains to the harbor, but I have no idea what they would do or what would happen to the cars. Do you know anything about harbor trains? Well, sure. And there are, I'm sure if you go on the net, you can find lots of articles about how harbor operations work, whether it's up in Duluth with Orcar. You know, these sound like he wants a floating boat that takes cars across to wherever. You don't need to know where it goes. You just have to say, this is going across Lake Michigan to such and so.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I mean, I love that kind of operation of the connection between rail and water.
Yeah.
And I have books, I have books on the Boston Harbor system.
New Jersey had them.
And the New York Harbor system.
New York Harbor.
San Francisco Harbor system. And so there are books out there that explain operations
and how they work.
On these harbor switching railroads, which are really cool.
Yeah.
So, and real sharp curves.
3, 4, or 5 tracks onto a barge. You know,
and you know, if you really want to do a model ship, I mean, you can have a freighter in there that just dwarfs the rail cars. You know, they're so cool.
And you don't even have to have the entire boat. You could just have a bow, or you could just have the stern where it comes on, represented only halfway. So
you know, we could talk for an hour on that subject alone. So if you want to discuss it more, please send an email to Doug or Steve at modelrailroadacademy.com, and we'll go over it with you, because I really
I know there are books out there. I think if you go to a hobby shop that carries model railroading books, they'll have something specifically on harbor operations. And it is very cool. It's a very niche end of the hobby.
And a lot of these little harbor railroads have their own historical society, so you can actually go and study the real like the San Francisco Belt Railway. I bought that book probably a year ago or so. It came out, and it's fascinating to learn about all the trackage and the piers and all that kind of thing. And
it doesn't have to be you know, like a 5-track barge. It could just be 2 tracks, and it could just be a small little barge that these go up onto. So you don't have to complicate things. It could be not a huge industrial.
There was a lot of street trackage, which I think is really cool. And a lot of these harbor railroads had to operate at night because they were so busy with truck traffic and so on during the day. Automobile traffic, if they operated at night. And
so the tracks would be buried in wood or buried in concrete, buried in dirt right up to the edge. Yeah, very neat.
Really cool stuff. Yeah, let us know about that. That's great.
This is Track Talk Live from Clickety and Clack and Model Railroad Academy. So thanks for joining us. We come to you monthly. And if you want to see any of our past broadcasts, we'll pay you $10 to do so. No. Hey, those all count. You can send cash, not checks, to me, and I'll pass them on to Doug.
And if anybody from Hollywood is watching, we do want to get on the Oscars probably next year.
One of these years. Yeah, as long as they announce it correctly. So, but anyway, we invite your questions. We still have about 10 minutes left for right now. What we don't get to this month, we'll do next month. Don't forget to be reading Doug's blogs on creating, designing, building a layout. It's now on, I think, part 12.2.
12, yeah, well,
12 and a half.
I squeezed another in,
Yeah.
and I am at 12.5 now.
Yeah, 12.5. And don't forget to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter on the screen right below where you're watching. And you'll get right in your inbox every week. You don't even have to ask for tips and tricks and video clips. So lots of good stuff.
We're happy to answer questions online or off. You
Yeah.
can certainly
We're here 24/7. We never sleep.
Yep. Get a hold of us through Model Railroad Academy. We'd love to help.
Yeah, for wherever you are in the world. So thank you for watching tonight, and we encourage you to submit your questions. So Terry has asked, I've installed Digitrack's SDH 166D FX decoder with sound. However, after installing, there is very little sound. Any ideas why? There could be a volume adjustment in that decoder that is set down. You know, that setting may be low. It could be that you're using the wrong impedance for your speaker, and it's not powerful enough to drive the speaker. Is it 8 ohms? Is it 100?
Is the speaker bad? Maybe the
speaker's bad too.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have it baffled. You have to have a covering around your speaker in order for it to push sound out and sound bigger. If not, it'll just come out very tinny, not very loud at all. So check those things, and if you still have questions, contact us offline or send us another question next month. But it could be a defective decoder too at the end of the day. But go into your settings and make sure you've got your volume up.
And you know, generally, if there's some kind of weird thing going on, I just reboot, start all over. Step 1 and reprogram the entire decoder. It's not that complicated, and that will clean it up if there's anything scrambled in the decoder.
Yeah. Okay. Sam has asked, is this the Sam who's our moderator?
Hi, Sam.
Hey, Sam. I know you're into model trains. Yes, she thinks we're nerds. But how do you feel about the real deal? What's the most memorable train ride you've ever been on?
Ooh.
You've taken a lot more than I have. As a kid, I used to take the Zephyr coming out of Chicago, and I would take it down to my grandmother's house in Galesburg. So I got a little bit of the California Zephyr there. But you've done a lot more, train riding than I have. So what's your most memorable?
Well, talking about Zephyrs.
Okay, that's enough time.
I rode
this guy could talk for 3 hours or more.
I didn't ride the California Zephyr all the way out, but I rode the Rio Grande Zephyr.
Okay.
Multiple times
so
before
you pick it up in Denver?
Off. Between Denver and Salt Lake, and that is so fantastic.
Yeah.
There are
the Royal Gorge.
Well, you go up over the Front Range, the Moffat Tunnel, over of course the name escaped me. Over the pass in Utah, Soldier Summit in Utah, and out to Salt Lake City, and you can still do that on the Amtrak, but it's a daytime trip, and there are 50 tunnels on that route. It's a daytime ride. It is absolutely beautiful.
Most railroads, as the old ones used to do back in the 40s and 50s, used to plan the most scenic parts of the ride during the daytime. So you wonder, why the heck does the Zephyr leave at 4 o'clock in the morning? It's so that you'll ride all day long, and then when you wake up the next morning, you're in the Rockies. Well, not the next morning, the next morning after that. But I would imagine Amtrak probably tries to do the same thing.
They're pretty much
Canadian trains probably do the same thing. They're not going to take you through the best scenery at night.
Yeah, right. I've gone through the Canadian Rockies. They're good. The Glacier Park is good.
Terry asked, does MRA sell those shirts? That's got to be a joke.
Sure,
question.
For $35.
Look, we'll leave an autograph.
Yeah.
You can have the shirt off our back if you like.
We'd love to. In fact, we had somebody else ask us about gear. We'd love to. Oh, calendars. Somebody wanted to know if we did a calendar. We'd love to do that if there's enough interest. If you guys want to send emails to us at Model Railroad Academy, we'll forward them on, and we'd certainly love to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll check about the shirts. I don't know, but there is going to be a shop store where you can buy things probably like Model Railroad Academy cups. So who knows? Probably the shirts as well, and maybe the official sandals and eyeglasses.
And you can maybe even buy one of these framed.
$10.
Yeah.
without the print. Doug's trying to turn a profit here. So Tim has asked, I have a question about Norfolk and Western cabooses. Do you know what caboose class number or type of caboose that Norfolk and Western used during their steam era? Wow.
Well, you got to go to the Historical Society for that one.
And probably online you can get that information.
There's some great books on the Norfolk and Western too that have been published. So between the books and the Historical Society, you can find out anything you want to know.
Yep. So let's see. I think we missed a couple questions up above. We've got about 4 minutes to go here, folks. So I have a Bachmann, this is from Fred, I have a Bachmann UP484 from the Overland Limited set. Yes, I know it's a Niagara, without smoke deflectors, but it's a nice looking loco, and I run whenever I feel it, like running it. It runs great, but it's a teeny bit underpowered. How can I increase the pulling power? It can pull about 15 cars, but I want it to pull at least 30. Aha! It sounds like Star Trek.
Weight.
Can it give you more power, Captain?
Yeah. Weight. If you can get more weight in your locomotive, get as much in there as you can.
So that would increase your traction. So the weightier your engine, the more it's going to be sitting heavier on the track, which will allow you to, keep your wheels clean and to make sure the engine's lubed and that your axles are all spinning.
Eliminate the drag as much as possible.
A little drop of grease on the axles. So anything you can do to make your engine heavier and your cars, well, I wouldn't say lighter, because actually having a little weight in the cars makes it look a little more prototypical. They track better through turnouts on curves, I think. So if you do them to NMRA standards, there's a special weight for each scale based on the footage or the inches of the car that you're using. And so if you're not an NMRA member, I'm an NMRA member, and I think, so join them, or I'm sure that information is available online too. So, I
think I mentioned this before on one other show, but I actually, this was for a guy that modeled a Penske. I actually had to take a switcher drive and mount it underneath an express car. I took the outside brake hangers off the side frames, so they didn't look like switcher trucks; they looked like express car trucks. So the express car was an auxiliary power unit, say, behind the steamer. So unless you looked really close, you couldn't tell it was a switcher guy.
Yeah.
So that's another way. If you can sneak in another power unit somehow, that would be another answer.
True. You could maybe use, if you had 30 cars, you could use a helper at the end of the train or the middle of the train, as the prototypes.
You can always double head too.
So, John has asked, and this is probably the last question we're going to have time for. Just curious if you've ever seen a Union Pacific steam layout. I've seen other railroads, but I've yet to see a UP one.
Really?
Oh, I'm surprised.
We have a guy in town here that has a beautiful HO layout UP steam. And
we're in the Twin Cities.
Our Brit friend Tom Watson, if he's watching, models a UP over in London. Oh, gads! I'm sure there's thousands of them all over the place.
If you go back, go to Model Railroader or Railroad Model Craftsman or any of those older magazines, and just go through the titles of the articles from years past. I'm sure you'll see where they have done articles specifically on UP for various scales.
And probably go to the next Union Pacific Historical Society convention where they're going to have model displays and probably operating layouts and everything. You could look up online. I don't know where the next one would be, but look up online and get that information, and you could find all kinds of friends that
the active ones have them annually, and sometimes the CB&Q does a fall one and a spring one and a national one. So there meets, and then there's a national convention. So UP undoubtedly would have it because it's still a going concern.
I go to the Southern Pacific National Conventions. They are absolutely fabulous. You meet all kinds of neat guys who are modelers, are involved in real railroads and all that. I'm sure the same is true with the Union Pacific.
Well, say goodnight, Gracie.
Good night, Dave. Good night, Mr. Clark.
Clickety. We're all out of time, folks. We'll be joining you in another month's time. Again, you can click on the live banner up at the top of the page on Model Railroad Academy's website, and you can pull down and you can select any of the past I don't know, 8, 9, 10 shows. If you've missed any of that award-winning stuff
Yeah.
that we're capable of putting out,
Send in your cards
often
and
don't
letters.
do it. Yeah. Send in cards and letters and cash, no checks, please. So we'll see you in a month. And as Doug loves to say, run the trains.
It was a fun night tonight. It was great.
We enjoyed it. And thanks very much for all your questions. And we look forward to your questions live in another month's time. We'll see you later. Good night, everyone.